Bobby Broyles and Tim McDonald here.
Should be a really interesting matchup. Buckle up. If you're not watching, you got some problems.
The college football season is back, and we couldn't be happier. Hello, fans, and welcome in to another season of This Week in CAA Football presented by Geico. I'm Bobby Broyles, joined by my colleague, the one and only Tim McDonald.
What is this, year 4? Unbelievable to think about.
Times are flying. We're getting old.
I wouldn't have anyone else doing it with me.
That makes me feel great, Tim. Thank you. Let's open up on the importance of Week 1 for the league, as a lot of the programs will be on a national stage taking on FBS foes. Plus, it's a chance to show the FCS what CAA football is made of. 8 FBS matchups on the slate in the opening week, and last year the conference was able to pick up a signature victory over an FBS opponent. Your expectations already for this season?
Yeah,
Tim?
I think the expectations are high. You know me. Every year it's high for this conference. We're not messing around. I mean, you look at last year, one win over an FBS foe. JMU, of course, beats SMU. Later in the season, that wasn't the first weekend of the game, but it was still a quality win for the conference. But all these games, not only the FBS, not only the non-conference FCS, I think I speak for a lot of people in CAA football, coaches and players. You take this opportunity and you got to grab it. Whether it's a non-conference FCS game against another conference, that so many conferences like the Patriot or the Big Ten or the Big South or all these other conferences across the FCS, when you're a CAA football member, winning these games is a big factor in your national relevance. It's a big factor in how other conferences look at you, how other teams look at you. I mean, talk about TV games, too. The FBS contest, 7 games on ESPN3 in this first week. You look at up and down the board, those FBS contests. 2 games versus the American, 3 versus the ACC. You're going to see a lot of ACC games this year. 1 versus the Big 12 and 1 versus the MAC. All the talk and the preseason hype and all this talk about the season's almost here, the season's ready, it's time to just let the games play out. We always talk about what are some of the keys, Tim, to winning an FBS matchup. Well, you have to handle the crowd noise. You have to handle all the things that get thrown at you, whether it's penalties, whether it's turnovers. It definitely helps to win the turnover battle. Year in and year out, we see so many teams come close, and we talk about, well, what could they have done? Sometimes it's the smallest things that you're not going to notice, and that's going to happen. That's every year, you give and take with FBS games. I'm just really excited, again, to stop the talk of how good teams are going to be. Just let things play out and see what happens. CAA football went 19-11 versus FCS in the non-conference, including playoffs last year, too. I think CAA football in general can be better, and I think a lot of teams want to prove that.
Wasting little time, let's get right to the matchup, starting first with 4 games on Thursday night. And what a big non-conference battle to open with, as Stony Brook plays host to North Dakota at 7 o'clock.
A game during the previous years that I talked about. A game that in my version is the FCS game of the week. North Dakota played 1 game previously in the state of New York. It was in 1930. The good news is it was a loss at Army West Point, if you want to take that for good news. Big Sky Conference member North Dakota, I think this is a team last year I've talked about, won 7 games, beat an FBS team in Wyoming, ranked in the top 10 last year in rush defense, especially the last 2 years as well. North Dakota Fighting Hawks changed their logo and name this year. Sophomore John Santiago, you're going to hear a lot about him. He's a running back, preseason All-American, preseason Offensive of the Year. But you know what?
Facing that Stony Brook
defense. You got a
defense.
Stony Brook defense, right? I mean, ranked number 1 in the FCS last season, number 1 in scoring in CAA football, number 1 in rush defense, number 1 in total defense. Is that going to translate over? We don't know. We'll find out. Stony Brook's going to have to stop the run first and also have some balance. Really excited to see Joe Carbone. He's going to be the starter. I'm really, really excited and looking forward to seeing a healthy Stacey Bedell and seeing that Stony Brook. I mean, this is an exciting game if you're Stony Brook at home. A great matchup. I'm glad these 2 teams scheduled this game. Stony Brook, I don't think they're going to, but you cannot afford at all to look ahead at Temple and versus Richmond the next 2 weeks. Just a really nice matchup. Big Sky and CAA football going at it to open the season on a Thursday night. What else can you love?
It's a big opener for the Seawolves indeed. Also at 7 on Thursday night. Delaware is at home versus in-state rival Delaware State in the Route 1 rivalry.
Yeah, who says it, right? I feel like we talk about this game every year. But, Delaware opening the season, what do we talk about? We talk about Delaware needing to establish just dominance right away. Not mess around in this game. This is a Delaware State team, no disrespect, but won 1 game last year, and it was the last game of the season. I mean, Delaware, the amount of bodies that they return, I don't think you need to get crazy. I know you've talked about changing the passing game, and I know you've just established the run and get it done. 18 overall starters back. The depth in the backfield and the depth on defense, I think, is going to take over. Return of Wes Hills, he's back, along with Thomas Jefferson, the CAA Rookie of the Year last season. Delaware's going to rotate all those running backs. I just don't think Delaware is at a point right now where they're going to, you can't afford to have a slow start. We talked about the slow starts in the openers in the past. I think that's going to change this year. A nice opponent and a nice chance for Delaware to establish what it wants to do in 2016 starting on Thursday.
At 7, Joe Harrisimiak leads the Black Bears for the first time as Maine takes on UConn on ESPN3 and ASN affiliates.
And UConn's a team we know has played CAA football in the past, especially the past couple of years. You look at 2015, Towson beat UConn. 2014, Stony Brook, you go back, Villanova played close last year. So UConn knows what CAA football is all about, knows that there's some quality teams. 17 starters back for Maine, 10 players on offense. That's a lot easier for a first-time head coach heading into an FBS game, especially when you know there's another FBS game on the schedule as well. Dan Collins is going to be the starter at quarterback. That offense, if they can find some consistency, find some flow, they're going to have a chance. UConn's a very good team, much improved under Bob Diaco in this second year, but Liam Cohen is the new offensive coordinator. Harrisimiak, as we mentioned, the youngest coach in Division I. Jordan Dunn is going to be the primary receiver. Maine's defense, I think, is going to keep them in it early. It's a question if the offense can produce and stay with that throughout the contest. I'm really excited just to see. I mean, think about it. When's the last time you saw Maine not coached by Jack Cosgrove?
Exactly.
It's been 20 plus years. So I'm just really excited. I think, again, you can't look forward, like Stony Brook, wait to look forward ahead. Toledo's the second FBS game next week.
Wrapping up Thursday night at 7:30, William & Mary travels to Raleigh to play NC State. The Tribe has history of playing ACC teams tough in the past, don't they, Tim?
Indeed they do. You know, you scroll across ESPN, it seems like the last 5 years. You've looked at William & Mary and you've seen, whoa, they're playing Maryland close. Whoa, they're playing West Virginia close. And it's true. I mean, look at the last couple of contests. In 2015, you look at NC State, a team that played in a bowl game, a team that's improved. But the last 7 FBS games for the Tribe, they've led in the second half in 4 of those contests. You look at the win in 2009 at UVA, 2010, we talked about those close losses at UNC, 2012, lost at Maryland by 1 point. You get the idea. I think William & Mary's not going to be scared to go into this, to go into NC State and lay an egg. They're going to be ready to play. 25 straight starts for Steve Cluley at quarterback. I think one of the keys in this game, as it always seems to be, is special teams, but Devontae Dedman. William & Mary makes plays on special teams. The last 3 years, this team has been the best special teams unit. If they're going to have any chance, I think it's going to come through that special teams play. Kendall Anderson is dealing with a shoulder injury that we didn't really know about. We don't know if he's going to go. If he can't go, redshirt freshman Albert Funderburk is going to make his Tribe debut, a guy who Coach Laycock said he talked a lot about and was excited about too. Again, I'm looking forward to this one for the Tribe because we know how much they have back, and I know they're not going to be scared playing at NC State.
Just one game on tap on Friday night. That's UAlbany heading to Buffalo for the second straight season at 7 o'clock on ESPN3.
UAlbany, every single starter is back on offense. 11 players, I mean, unheard of. But Greg Gattuso, talking pregame this week leading up, he thinks his team is on track. And whether that means are they going to go and win FBS game right away, I don't think it's that simple. But he does feel like this team is on track. He felt like this was a better camp. Interestingly, we saw Nevin Sussman as the starter. He won the battle over DJ Crook. Buffalo went 5-7 last year, won a couple of games at home, and one of those games was UAlbany. It's incredibly difficult to play an FBS team on the road. Even more difficult to play the same FBS team in back-to-back seasons. UAlbany, I think it's only the second FBS opponent in program history. It's going to be a tough game, but it will be nice to see UAlbany progress and keep playing these type of games.
They did. They stuck with them in the first quarter last year with a couple of touchdowns. 7 more games on tap Saturday beginning in Pittsburgh as Villanova makes a trip to Western PA to take on Pitt out of the ACC. This one can be seen on ESPN3 and the Watch ESPN app at 1:30.
How many times can we mention it? But the 32nd and final season for Andy Talley. Yes, the winningest active FCS and FBS head coach across the nation. So Villanova, 5 starters back on both sides, but they're experienced guys. We've talked about that. And again, a lot like William & Mary, Villanova has a history of playing pretty well and pretty tight against FBS foes. Look at Boston College a couple years back, Syracuse, a heartbreaker a couple years back, and UConn last year. I mean, so Nova has played tight. They know how to play in these types of situations. Pitt's a very good team, though. A team that has had back-to-back 1,000-yard rushers. James Conner is back. We know that's made national headlines. 8-5 in 2015. Offensive line, I think Pat Narduzzi and Pitt is very, very good. I don't think Villanova is going to come in and just absolutely lay over. It's going to be a tough battle. Zach Bednarczyk, we get to see really, you're the starter, first-year guy. at quarterback starting the whole season. I'm really excited to see Villanova moving forward on offense. I think it's just a very, very tough opponent to have to open up with.
At 3:30 on many ASN affiliates, Gardner Webb heads to Elon. This one took 3 overtimes last year, Tim.
It did, and Elon got the job done.
Yep.
Obviously, a critical game for them. A harder fall camp, in Skrosky's words. I think he said his players, the bar was just set higher this year, and they rose to that and accepted that challenge. First home opener for Elon since 2009. We see Connor Christensen is the guy under center. He's back, 9 starters back on offense. Really interested to see if Elon's run game can develop. Malcolm Summers is a guy last year who started to get more carries as the year went on. We know Elon's going to have so much more success possibly when they can have balance, especially at a run game. We've seen what they can do with the pass game, and we've seen that take shape, but I want to see the run game take shape. Really happy that these two teams, both from the same state, scheduled this game, a non-FCS game against the Big South Conference. So Gardner Webb and Elon. Elon has that new video board. It's a nice way for Elon to open up the season against 2 good FCS opponents.
Also at 3:30 on ESPN3 and the Watch ESPN app, Richmond makes a short trip to Charlottesville to take on Virginia. A lot of history between Spider head coach Danny Rocco and this UVA program.
We could talk about this one for a long time.
We
could. But we have talked 16 of 22 starters back for the preseason CAA favorites. I'll tell you one thing. If you're Coach Bronco Mendenhall starting at UVA, I know you're coming in and changing the tradition and doing all these things to make Charlottesville fans happy and to make yourself happy because it's a big deal for him to take over that job. I would not want to have to play my first game as the UVA head coach against a Richmond team that's ranked in the preseason top 5, that has Kyle Lauletta, that has David Jones, that has all these players, Brian Brown at receiver. Again, it's going to be a tough task for Richmond. You have to think offensively if they can stay in it early, if they can stay in it in the first half, get Brian Brown his numbers. He's going to have at least over 100 yards. Kyle Lauletta is going to have to find a flow too. The biggest question mark we talked about, if Richmond's going to have any troubles, it's going to be with that run game. We really don't know who the pronounced starter is going to be. Could be Gordon Collins, could be a guy that we don't know. Richmond has plenty of guys, though, I'll tell you, as you know better than anyone. Plenty of players on their roster who probably grew up watching UVA and probably wanted to go to UVA, and UVA said, sorry, you're not good enough to play here. Good news for Richmond, if you can call it good news, UVA is at Oregon in week 2. It's a lot of pressure on Bronco Mendenhall. Danny Rocco and this team has played well traditionally. Look at that NC State game a couple years back in 2013. I think it's going to be a lot like that where it's a very close game and it's going to come down to a couple of plays. You never know with an FBS game, but I think it could be close.
Later that evening at 6 p.m. on CA.TV, James Madison opens its season at home versus Morehead State. First game under new head coach Mike Houston.
It is 17 starters back for the Dukes. Houston finally gets to open up and show us what his offense is going to look like. It's not going to be the triple option, but we think it's going to be run-heavy oriented. We think the defense is also going to look new, going to have some new faces as well. But I think the rush game for James Madison is going to take over. An interesting matchup because James Madison played Morehead State last year at home, and that was a lopsided game. Cardin Johnson, Khalid Abdullah, they had 3 100-yard rushers last year in the game versus Morehead State. I don't think maybe that's going to happen again, but I think that run game for JMU is going to be too much. Interesting thing to watch, I should say. Brian Schur and Connor Mitch both could play at quarterback. We don't really know exactly who's the starter throughout the whole season. Keep an eye on that, especially James Madison at home, but it's nice for Houston to open up at home as a new head coach against a team in Morehead State that is struggling to find wins the last couple of years.
At 7, Rhode Island heads west to take on Kansas out of the Big 12 on ESPN3 and the Watch ESPN app.
Had to look this up. I did not know a CAA football team is only playing one Big 12 team this year. And we talk about Kansas has never played a CAA football opponent except once, and that was Villanova when obviously they weren't part of the CAA in 1940. Oh, wow. That was a loss, so if you can take that, we'll take that one.
You're digging into the history
I know. Well,
episode.
Kansas is a team that went 0-12 in 2015. The last 2 years, interestingly, still a Big 12 team. It's still an FBS team. So I'm not saying things are going to get crazy and start happening and predict all these things. But lost last year's opener in an FCS foe to South Dakota State, a very good South Dakota State team. The season previously, a very close game against Southeast Missouri State. So Kansas, a team that lost all games, an FBS team, obviously still hard. Rhode has never beat an FBS opponent in 13 tries. Wes McCoy is the starter, though. I'm interested to see him. He's the starter under center for Rhode Island. He started the last 4 games of 2015.
Also at 7 on ESPN3 and the Watch ESPN app, Towson will be in Tampa to take on South Florida at the American. Tigers almost had a win last year versus fellow American opponent East Carolina.
A game that I think me and you maybe didn't think it was going to be that close, and all of a sudden it was. It was an 8-point game down the stretch. Towson needed to make a couple of plays and didn't get it done. USF is a team that went to a bowl game for the first time in 5 years last year. Interesting stat here, returns over 90% of all the offensive yards from 2015. Goes to tell you how talented this team could be. Picked first in its division in the American Athletics, so a team that under Willie Taggart has a lot of high hopes. Towson bring back 19 starters, though. I mean, talk about the offense. We know Oregon transfer Morgan Mahalik is going to be the starter under center, announced this week by Rob Ambrose. I think there's a lot of unknown there, but it's also kind of interesting because we don't know anything about them. Neither does USF. Neither do a lot of people. So maybe that's a good thing for Towson heading into this game. Obviously, expect Darius Victor to get at least 20-plus carries. If they find any stability at the run game and can keep up with USF's offense, I think this game can be close.
Then we wrap up week 1, if you hadn't had enough already, at 8:30. Exactly, at 8:30 as New Hampshire, for the second year in a row, open up on the West Coast versus San Diego State.
San Diego State, a team that is very, very good, ranked in some preseason polls. A very tough matchup, a very, very tough California matchup for the second straight year. Much like Towson, we do not know a lot about New Hampshire's quarterback. Trevor Knight is a guy who was a redshirt freshman last year, played a little bit, named the starter this week, beat out Adam Reese. Obviously did something well if New Hampshire named him the starter. San Diego State is a team that has a running back who's an All-American. The Mountain West preseason team of the year brings back the offensive player of the year, defensive player of the year, and the special teams player of the year. It's going to be at where the Chargers play at Qualcomm Stadium, so a phenomenal venue and a phenomenal opportunity for New Hampshire, where nationally this game is the only game FBS that we have that is not broadcast on TV. Nationally, a lot of people are picking San Diego State to just roll through their schedule. So if you're New Hampshire, you have to take that with a grain of salt moving forward and say, well, we got nothing else to lose. But it's a very tough matchup. Interested to see New Hampshire's defense. We talked about a no-look attitude. We really don't know a lot of guys on that defense, so it'll be interesting to see who those guys that step up and need to step up will be.
CAAsports.com/live scores is your source for live scoring and in-game live stats throughout the first week of the college football season. Also remember to check in with us on Sunday with the Sunday Roundup on CAAFootball.com.
You know my spiel every season.
Every
you can
single.
Continue to follow the league on our many social media platforms, such as Facebook.com/CAAFootball. You got Twitter @CAAFootball, and join the conversation. Use #CAAFB. I'm just ready to get back. I know a lot of games, and we break down so many things. You never know what's going to happen in the first weekend of play, FCS or FBS game. That's why college football is the greatest thing ever.
That is right, Tim. Good luck to all of the CAA football teams this week. Enjoy the games, everyone.